I learned from yesterday's presentation
Mm-hmm.
at Johns Hopkins. They told me ahead of time to elevate the laptop so that it's at a better angle. Then when I did that, I realized I had to, clean up a couple of things in the background.
Let's see if my background is not too messy either.
Good. How are you doing?
Good. Thank you, Robert. And yeah, I'm excited for the session for sure.
Yep. I assume Dakota's going to be on?
Yep. He's here.
We had 30 people at my dialing in.
Oh, wow.
In for my lecture yesterday, so that was pretty cool.
We have 2 more minutes. I see one in the waiting room, James. So James is actually works for a company called Erda. They do ground source heat pump, and they've done it, in 24 as supermarkets in the UK, and they want to install EV chargers now into the supermarkets.
Wow! In the parking lots?
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
He's joining. I see him in the waiting room. I see more.
I went to the website of each of the companies.
Oh, awesome!
And so that was really. I have a couple of introductory remarks about that.
Awesome.
I also assume, Dakota, can you hear us?
Yes. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay, wonderful. So, I'm going to try. I'm probably going to stay on mute for the majority of the presentation. It can get a little noisy here. I'm working.
Okay.
Yeah, there's a couple of us here. So working on it.
Okay, so a couple of things. I assume that you'll keep track of timing. I prepared remarks through the 2 sections. I have a watch, but I'm
admitting people to come into the webinar right now. Just FYI.
Okay. So you track timing, and you're also, Dakota, going to accumulate the questions for the Q&A, right?
Yep.
Okay.
Awesome. Looks like we got James here.
We got Jacob, Zach, Ian.
Somebody's got a nice background there.
It's always James.
Is that aspirational?
I think you're on mute, James. I don't know if you can unmute. Let me unmute you.
I actually wonder if it might mute people by default when they join. We'll see.
Yeah. But right now he's on mute.
There you go. Yep.
No, I'm unmuted. I am. It is aspirational. I am in relatively cloudy right now.
And, where are you?
I'm in Connecticut, right outside of the city in Fairfield County. And it's kind of cloudy and overcast here, but this background is much more suiting to my mood.
You look good.
Thank you.
We got JC from Tarphone joining. I think we have everybody.
Wonderful. Let's see.
So,
let me share on my screen.
Sure.
Can you guys see? Is it okay if I keep it open like this just so I can see the chat in case there's any questions?
Absolutely. Thanks, Dakota. Good afternoon, everyone. Thank you for your time. I'm just going to keep it very brief because I know, we have a very small amount of time. In in short, our goal for today is to provide you with an informative and interactive session on financing the structures and the funding process for the physical assets of your products. As you know, our vision at Pearl Street has always been, to help companies such as yourself diversify capital sources for the physical assets and streamline the fundraising process from onboarding financials, the structuring, and transaction to asset management. Due diligence for lenders, typically understood in terms of borrowers' ability to fulfill debt services and provide secure returns. This is generally accurate, but too narrow to be useful for earlier stage startups looking to commercialize their products, and therefore masks critical behind the scenes action. So in this session, we will have an holistic overview of due diligence with our special guest, Robert Gurman, who is an independent financial advisor at Pro Energy Consulting and a senior consultant to New York Green Bank, where he developed the financing structures for e-mobility businesses. And then after his session, Robert's session, we will have a short demo by our CTO, Dakota, for our platform and how we can help you create a much more dynamic and efficient fundraising process. So I'm going to hand over the session to Robert from here. Thank you.
Thank you, Touraj. So welcome, everybody. First and foremost, I hope under the current circumstances, you all and your families and loved ones are all safe, and that your companies are managing through this crisis, at least to the best that can be expected under the circumstances. I also just want to mention that Dakota will be fielding questions. We'll have a Q&A session at the end. Certainly, if there's anything that comes up on the spot, please make that known in the chat to Dakota, and we'll try to address it. I'm certainly amenable to taking questions or drilling down to a deeper level on anything as we go, or we can take care of it during the Q&A. So with that having been said, we have a great group today, diverse and innovative companies. Obviously, they all reflect the vibrancy and potential of e-mobility. I can imagine that each and every one of you, your business outlook has changed in the last 2 months with coronavirus, but in my experience, the e-mobility sector overall is still moving ahead. Things are certainly slower, but there is still a tremendous amount of activity, and the expectation is that e-mobility will be a sector that will come out the other end. May, June, July, who knows exactly when, but the demand for all aspects of vehicle electrification will continue. And so I personally am very bullish, and I hope that you all share that same outlook. My focus has been in the e-mobility sector. As Touraj said, I'm a consultant for the New York Green Bank and running as a consultant, the business development for clean mobility and electrification. At the Green Bank, we're working very closely with NYSERDA for their objectives of supporting Governor Cuomo's overall environmental goals, and transportation, clean transportation is certainly integral to that. It's really interesting. I've looked up the websites of all of our attendees today, and you really represent quite a range of innovation in the clean mobility space. And I think that is an example of how vibrant and the very, very high expectations that we have for the sector overall. I don't know specifically what your individual approaches have been to financing, but we're going to cover a lot of ground today. My experience is that capital in general is very interested in e-mobility, but they are mostly, financial capital is mostly watching from the sidelines. More of the investment and financing has come from strategic investors, those in some aspect of transportation, including the major oil companies and gasoline retailers, but as well the major industrials and OEMs. Financial investors have not yet really dived in, but what we're hoping to do today is go through the methodology that will put ourselves, put your companies into a good position for attracting capital. Dakota, if you would go to my part of the presentation, the credit roadmap, great, and then go to the next page. Great, perfect. So the credit, well, credit, the word credit itself comes from the Latin credere, which means to believe. And the credit roadmap is a process to get lenders to believe in your company's business and long-term prospects. What we're going to try to do is, through the roadmap, lead to the decision of whether or not your company is ready for financing, and the focus will be on project finance, but all forms of finance, if applicable. And we're trying to be as efficient as possible in this process by importing data from your financial model. And I understand that each of you have worked with Pearl Street on the development and enhancement of your financial models. And so with our objective in the credit roadmap, no extra steps of physical input or analysis. We take your financial data from the model and it goes into the credit roadmap and comes out the other end to score, determining the financeable or not decision output. And then the next step in this process is to determine strengths and weaknesses and risks and mitigants. SWOT, S-O-W-T, is another label that you might have come across, and that's strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats. But what we're going to do is look inward at your company, the balance sheet, the business model, personnel, etc., as well as external, your competitive position, the subsector of the industry that you're in, and the market and the environment. And we're going to identify risks and associated mitigants. This is extremely important. The lenders themselves will identify the risks quite quickly. And so you have to be proactive in your capital raising process in how you or your company is mitigating or managing these risks. Next slide, please. So we're going to go now through the components of the credit roadmap. Really comes across in 5 different groups. The first, very important, is the revenue source or sources. And this provides the tangible and measurable source of the economics for your business. But beyond that, it's going to identify the specific contractual details and credit quality of your primary customers. In particular, through the roadmap, we'll determine, is there a particular revenue source identified? Is that revenue source or sources contracted? How much of your projected revenues are coming from contracted counterparties? And how much are you projecting is going to be based upon just market success? How long, in terms of your contracts, how long are these arrangements in place for? Who is the counterparty or counterparties? Are they credible counterparties, hopefully with a credit rating or a particular balance sheet? But the objective here is to convince the lenders that you have contracted sources of revenue that will be for a fairly long period of time, 3, 5, 7, or 10 years, with a counterparty that is credible, either has themselves a discernible balance sheet and operating model, or even better, a credit rating from one of the major credit agencies. Further, in terms of the revenue sources and what's contained in those contracts, are there credit and or collateral requirements of your company in satisfying those contracts? And are there milestones in those contracts? You have to get to a certain level of production or output or delivery, and by what point or points in time. Next, we'll be looking at the cost structures. And by this, we're looking at how the company intends to source and has costed out your own delivery of your product or service. This is very, very important to determining your financeability. The lenders will be looking to see if there is enough margin to comfortably cover the lender's financing costs and or from the equity perspective, the equity return. This will be picked up immediately in the scoring process through the metrics such as coverage ratios and IRRs. And this goes back to the Latin word credere, because we want the lenders to believe that the contracted nature of your revenues and the fixing of the costs leads lenders to believe that your projections and faith in the debt coverage over time. So some of the specific points we'll be looking for in the cost structure side of the roadmap: production capacity. Is it owned by you, or is it going to be sourced by a third party? What ways to demonstrate the capability to fulfill the revenue source requirements, to demonstrate that the cost structure is firmly in place, that there's a supply chain in place, and to demonstrate the logistics and delivery plans that you have in place. So that's it. Those are some of the high-level aspects for the cost structures. Turning to company information, this will be general information about your company: date founded, how long you've been in business, founders, shareholders, equity investors at this point. If possible, latest financial statements, and even more ideal, audited financial statements. And for lenders, the best case would be minimum 2 to 3 years historic audited financial statements. Turning to the financial model, and this we will have a demonstration in a few minutes from Dakota. But as we go through the financial model, what will come out the other end will be the financial metrics most important to lenders, such as debt service coverage ratio, and to investors, the equity IRR. And this as well in the financial model will provide functionality to creating scenarios, different financing structures that are compatible with your expected growth patterns, and so that you can derive the most efficient source or sources of capital. And what goes into the financial model, as I'm sure many, if not all of you know, are the fundamentals: contracted revenues, non-contract revenues, operating cash flow, cost structure, profit, cash, total assets, total liabilities, so on and so forth. And these items are input and or projected for the long term. So as I said before, looking to 3, 5, hopefully up to 10 years projected out, around which debt can be layered in. And we'll put in a variety of debt structures into the financial model. Importantly, the functionality of the model allows for sculpting the debt. If your company is in a early stage but has contracts and is looking to grow, then we're going to want to ensure that the debt structure is compatible with that growth expectation. You don't want to put in place requirements for repayment early on when there's no expectation that you'll be able to make those repayments early on. But later on, as you scale, as you start to generate more and more free cash flow, then the lenders will be comfortable seeing that the debt amortization comes in a later period. And as I said, Dakota will be doing a demonstration of this later on in the presentation. All of this leads to credit scoring, and this will lead to a binary financeable or not decision for each particular company. The way we've set up the credit scoring is a maximum score of 50 points. Financeable is 35 points. What's really good about the credit scoring system is that it covers a range of metrics, and so it enables a company to reach the financeable threshold of 35 points through a variety of positive metrics, while still identifying various weaknesses, either in the financial approach or the business model. And it's certainly the expectation that Pearl Street will work with each company to buttress those lagging metrics and emphasizing the positive aspects of the business. And what we do through the scoring is we weight the various results, such as for contracted revenues. If you have 100% or 90% or more of your contracted of your revenues in a form of contract, then you're going to score 5. If you have very, very little contracted, then you're going to get a very low score in this particular aspect of the credit roadmap. But so on, scoring for operating margin, producing a debt service coverage ratio. By the way, I just want to, I'm assuming that everybody knows what debt service coverage ratio is, but just in case people don't know what it is, it's the key metric, as I mentioned, for lenders. And it's looked at from the operating cash flow over the required debt service in any one period of time. It's a calculation that's done both on a periodic basis, it can be each quarter, and certainly is done on an annual basis. It's identifying the minimum coverage ratio over the term of the loan, as well as average ratio. Then there are other ratios that get scored through the roadmap, such as on the balance sheet side, the quick ratio and the current ratio. Current ratio is current assets over current liabilities, and lenders like to see a positive number there. More importantly, the quick ratio shows how much of the current assets themselves are liquid assets, cash in particular, the distinction being that cash is right there as opposed to current receivables, which are also viewed on the balance sheet as current assets, but still reliant on somebody making a payment to your company for you to convert that current receivable into cash. And then we calculate equity returns, projected equity returns, and cash-on-cash returns. Let's see. And through that credit scoring process, we get to then the X-ray analysis. And the roadmap and the scoring will identify the strengths, good contracts, strong margins. Will identify weaknesses, lack of liquidity, for example, high fixed costs, and also will go through a peer and or competitive review to see how your company is positioned within your sector of the industry? Do you have a unique or proprietary technology? Is your business model defensible? Are your margins defensible? Or your market position, is that defensible? And we'll look at those weaknesses and the strengths, but in particular the weaknesses, and see what kind of mitigants are in place for you as managing your business, or what kind of mitigants we can put in place before we start looking for financing. Let's see. Okay, I think we're good on time. Dakota, if you would go to the next, financial structuring. This is the second part of the presentation. Structuring your financing. Next slide. Okay, great. So maximizing a prudent level of debt. Why do we want debt? Primarily because, and why do we want to maximize debt? It's because debt is cheaper than equity, and those of you who have raised capital know how expensive equity can be. Effectively, for equity, you're giving away a piece of your company, but with necessarily that. So not all. First of all, because it's unlikely that a lender will be so kind as to give you all debt. But more importantly and more fundamentally, the burden of debt adds a level of risk to your business. Somebody's going to lend you some money. They want to make sure that they get repaid. So it's going to come with conditions, and you want to ensure that you can repay the debt. So we want to find the right balance between a prudent level and the maximum level of debt for your particular company. We want to be able to scale the financing structure. You're in a growth mode by definition, so you want financing that's going to be able to grow with you. However, you only want to pay for what you are using in the short term, yet have the capacity and the flexibility to take on more debt as your business grows, as your business scales, and only pay for that later on in the growth stage. Critical commercial terms. So a loan isn't just, here's a wad of cash and pay me back in 5 years. There's a lot more that goes into it. It has terms and conditions, and these are of great importance to you as you run your business over time. As just mentioned, the ability to scale is certainly important, but also the overall term, the tenor of the loan. Is it 2 years? Is it 5 years? Hopefully it's longer, maybe 10 years. And also, does it have acceptable terms for extending it? Maybe it starts with a short term, but as and when you grow to a certain level, it will automatically extend to a longer period of time. What are the repayment requirements for the loan? And what's the schedule of that? As I mentioned before, when we're working on the financial model, we're going to layer in a level of debt. The flexibility of the financial model enables us to do a variety of scenarios and debt structures. So all of that will be factored in. Also, the credit spread and the interest rate. I'm assuming that you all know the difference between the all-in interest rate and what the credit spread is and the funding source, but I'll just very quickly go through that just to make sure. So you'll have the interest rate on the loan is made up of two fundamental components. That's the funding source, which is where the lender itself is getting his or her financing. And then there's a credit spread on top of that. And that's going to be, obviously, if you've been reading the newspapers at all, the last couple of months, the core interest rate level is very, very low. 10-year treasuries, I think this week, are at 0.65%. And lenders fund themselves by borrowing in the capital markets. So they're going to be financing at a very low rate. But you, as a startup company, as a borrower, carry high risk. So the credit spread, which will be determined specifically based on the lender's assessment of your business, that credit spread will be 500, 600, 800 basis points. So your interest rate will be a function of both the base rate and the credit spread. And all of that will be incorporated into the financial model. And you will want as well that getting back to the critical commercial terms, you'll want that the lender gives you some flexibility as you grow and as your business matures, and as you become a better credit, that the credit spread, if you reach certain metrics, will enable you to get to a lower and more manageable credit spread. The last critical commercial term I want to mention is that you're going to be in an early stage, but at some point, hopefully, your business is going to be able to pay distributions. You want to ensure that you understand what the lender's terms are for making distributions to you and your shareholders. That usually comes down to making certain milestones and achieving certain debt service coverage ratios, but you have to really pay a lot of attention to what the lender's terms are there and be able to negotiate some flexibility in those. Dakota, go to the next page, please. Next screen, yes, preparing for the lenders. So first point, compiling all of the required information. Before you approach the lenders, you have to think through preparing all of the information. Lenders like a lot of information. The more, the better. They like financial info, which is the financial statements. As I mentioned, the ideal is 3 years historic audited financial statements, but they certainly like as much financial information as possible, and that's the statements as well as financial models and projections. Company info about your company, your management team, production, supplier, performance information about the company, any contracts that you have, biographies of your management team. Preparing and organizing all of this information is in a data room is certainly a very, very important part, again, of setting yourselves up credibly once you start to approach the lenders. The lender solicitation process, once you've put together all the information and organized it in a data room, and I think part of Dakota's demonstration in a few minutes will also touch on aspects of the data room. But then as you start to prepare to actually solicit lenders, having the data room all prepared, having a non-disclosure agreement prepared and ready to go is also important. And then you want to craft a very crisp cover letter. It's going to state who you are, what your objectives are in terms of the financing, what you're looking to raise, and what the funds will be used for. And then have perhaps a 1 or 2 page cover sheet describing your business, very, very crisp, very synthesized, and then a reference after the NDA is signed to move into access to the data room. You have to prepare yourself once you have gone out into the market and started approaching lenders. You have to be prepared for a very, very lengthy, time-consuming, and management time-consuming process of diligence by the lenders. They're going to pour over all the information that's in the data room. There will be lots of questions. There will be phone calls, conference calls. Your objective will be, I think, to get the lenders, get to meetings at lenders and get lenders on site to your facilities. You want to show them your product. You want to show them your management team. You also want to get to the lender's office and meet those on the team that they're assigning. Face-to-face contact is always the best. Obviously, under the current circumstances, that will have to wait until we can all emerge. The credit process that the banks go through itself is lengthy. It's best described as 2 steps forward, 1 step back. But you want to go through that process, hopefully get to the point where you get a term sheet presented by the lender of the terms and conditions that they would be willing to lend to you. Then hopefully that you're so successful that you have to go through a selection process of 2, 3, 4 lenders and coming out selecting the one that's best for you and your company's long-term prospects. That's it, and I think we're perfect as far as time. I'll turn the microphone over to Dakota, who's going to take you through the demonstration, and I look forward to any and all questions at the back end. Thank you.
Awesome, yeah, and just making sure that you guys can hear me. Can you hear me, Robert?
I can, yes.
Excellent. So yeah, if there's any questions, just feel free to put them in the chat, and you can do that while I'm giving the demo. And then after the demo is over, we'll go over the any questions that you might have. And of course, you can always unmute and chime in at that time too. So thank you very much, Robert. I just wanted to cover real quickly kind of an overview of our platform and what we're trying to achieve here. Obviously, given the context, with e-mobility, all of you guys have, at least to a certain degree, physical assets, and many of those assets are streaming data or have the capability to stream data. This data is really important to build up your inputs that will eventually go into your financial model, and it depends really on what stage you are in terms of your business. Some of those inputs are going to change over time, so it's very important to collect the data over time. And to build those assumptions into your model properly. So our platform acts as a central kind of repository. It's the place where you will be able to converse with lenders, build up your financial model, change the inputs, test the inputs, review the output. Even you get a little bit of a peek behind the curtain today. You'll see how the credit score is calculated. It also acts as a home for all of your deal room documents. All of the documents that Robert mentioned that are going to be needed, we've got a checklist there for you and a place to upload all of that information. There's also a couple of bells and whistles that are going to be very helpful from a lender's perspective as well. So we're really trying to streamline this process. It can be a very difficult process to go through by yourself. And we want to bring all of the data forward to inform the process as you move forward and make it very cost effective for everybody involved. So I'm going to real quickly show you just kind of, I don't want this to be an Excel tutorial at all. So just keep in mind that there is a financial model behind all of this. The idea is that this model is built to be read by our engine, by our algorithm. And it will go through, it will extract all of the data from these documents, from all of these sheets. There's of course a home for many of the moving parts that are going to be important for your business. Things like inventory, unit costs, lifespans, salvage value, depreciation, assumptions around manufacturing, pricing, costs. And these are just a few of, kind of the highlighted inputs that you're going to be playing with for this example. So this model is very comprehensive. We keep a running list of all changes that are made to the model. There's kind of a README section as well. There's checks that are performed on every sheet to make sure that everything balances, that nothing's going wrong, because of course, the reason why all of this is done in Excel is because all of these assumptions around your business can be very bespoke. All of the logic and the way that you calculate these forecasts for your business can be very, very customizable. But at the end of the day, they all need to plug into, as Robert was saying, these financial statements. You need to generate the same metrics that these lenders are going to be expecting. And so that's why all of this logic is built in this way. So you can see there's, for example, just a couple of key inputs here at the whole model level. different toggles, things like tax rates, discount rates. At the input table level, I'm going to show you an example of a company with just 3 different asset types. We've got vehicle A, bike B, scooter C. They've got associated unit costs. And what I'm going to do is play with the pricing just as a quick basic example to show you what you can expect. So there's also going to be longer kind of time series forecasts that you're going to make, assumptions around sales growth rates, sales assumptions, cost assumptions, marketing assumptions, all of that. It plugs into different sheets that then flow through the rest of the model. But I don't really want to go too deep into this. Of course, we can, when it comes time to build this model for you guys, we can go into it. Robert was showing, different assumptions around, basically sculpting the debt for your company and for this scenario. So I'm just taking a simple example here. It's a loan of $850,000. The interest rate was 14%. Okay. And this model generates all of the financial statements that you're going to need. So, your income statement, your balance sheet, and your statement of cash flows. And you can see all of the data flowing through. There's also behind the scenes a credit score that's being calculated based on different thresholds, all based on the experience of working with lenders. You can see in this example, this company has some issues. We've got a really low margin. We've got very low debt service coverage ratios across multiple periods. We've got this flag here is failing, right? So basically the credit score is too low. So what I'm going to do is go back to the input tables, and I'm going to really quickly just change some pricing assumptions. And this will be quite dramatic just for the example's sake. So I'm changing some inputs, okay? And going back to the credit scoring tab, now you can see this flowing through. So you can see now the credit score overall is passing. There are some periods where it struggles, and then ultimately it builds up. And so now I'm going to show you on the front end what this looks like. Okay, well, just a second, sorry. It logged me out. Okay, so this is just an example scenario that I built for you. This is the way that you're going to use our front-end platform. You can add different users. You can add users on your own end. You can even add investors and set the proper permissions here. All of the different versions of your financial model will be uploaded here. We even build little video tutorials just to show you how to work the model. And all of this data is flowing into our system. So what's happening here, you can see the same inputs, right? Vehicle A, bike B, scooter C. You can see the pricing, 150, 25. So this was before. So, and all of the financial statements are built out here. So all of this data basically exists in the database, and this is what the lender is going to be using to evaluate your business. So you can see, you can click on the different line items here and get the associated plots if you need them. What I'm going to do is recalculate now. So I'm going to pull that data, and just give a second because I'm streaming some video here for Zoom. But what it's doing is now parsing all of that data in that Excel sheet, and it's re-uploading and recalculating all of the assumptions. So you can see the pricing changed for these assets, and of course, all of the forecasted variables change. So now when we go to the credit scoring tab, and you can see here, all of the ratios are being updated. You can see now the model is passing. You're hitting that critical threshold, okay? And there's the associated metrics here. And some of these will change over time, and it really depends kind of on your business and the exact scenario we're looking at. We can also add other underwriting policies just based off of your conversations with lenders. On the deal room side of things, this will be the home for all of the information about your company that Robert mentioned. So that will go there. There's going to be information about the structure of the deal, the status of the deal, any pending funds. There will be a place to fill out some qualitative questions based around that credit roadmap that Robert was showing, and upload the associated documents. Okay. And then lastly, all of this data can be pulled in. This is just kind of an example of a view that you might use. all of the projections can be selected. Well, you can select which data you want to show to investors, which documents you want to show to investors, and then you can mix it together with some marketing text. This is just an example company, right? You've got a marketing section, a little placeholder video, and you can see we're actually pulling in. I just picked a couple of stats just for example's sake. So what's happening is the lender will now have access to all of this data in a gated manner. So you can show the information that's relevant to the scenario, that's relevant to this lender, and you can kind of go back and forth. And lastly, and I think something that's very, very important, especially for these types of businesses dealing with physical assets, all of the data can be collected and parsed on our back end. And actually, because your financial model now is basically, it lives in a database. It's not just Excel. This data can be can flow through the model and can be updated in real time. So you can see some examples here with just cash balance calculations, monthly revenue projections, keeping track of subscribers, and you can even link accounts and track different transactions. For example, you could look at location data for some of your assets. Here's just an example here as well, looking at one company, looking at the steam usage of a certain project across time and the associated gas costs. You can even track some covenants that are relevant to your deal. So I just really thought it was important to show how everything's tied together here, how the roadmap flows into how your data flows into the financial model, how your financial model is associated with the credit roadmap, and what this ultimately looks like to investors. Let me go back now to the presentation. And if you guys have any questions, please just let us know in the group chat. And let me hand this back over to Raj. Did you want to cover anything?
No, all good. I just want to make sure that there's enough time for everyone to ask questions to Robert.
And if you guys have any questions, just I think you might need to unmute, as I think you might join on mute by default if needed. Otherwise, just feel free to type in the group chat.
This is Olivier from me, but just had a question on the screen. We could see predictive modeling and assets management. Mm-hmm. What was this about?
Yeah, so in many cases, actually, a lot of the companies that we deal with, there's cyclicality in their sales cycle. And so we actually build predictive models for actually many different scenarios, not just even unit sales. In some cases, we're actually helping to optimize the performance of some of these assets. So it's really customized. That's why I didn't show it today. But depending on your business, it could be very relevant and often ends up becoming an important input into your financial model. And that's why we built the system the way that we have. Everything here is kind of linked, and it's all very, very important. Taraj, did you want to say anything on that?
Oh, yep, that's it.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Yeah, and if that's important for your company, then we can talk about that and what that looks like for you in particular. It often comes down to what data you're collecting or capable of collecting.
It really helps with scenario modeling as well, Olivier, especially if you want to introduce a new product, if you want to make some decisions about elongating the life of the assets or refurbish it. These types of predictive models helps. But the first step is to make sure that you're streaming the data and the data is in the right quality and the right structure.
Mm-hmm.
No, I understand. It's clear. Thank you.
Wonderful. Any other questions?
Yeah, guys, this is JC here from Tarform.
Hi, JC.
Hope everything is fine. Very impressive, of course, the platform. A question for you. I mean, on our end, subscription is not something we're going to do right now. But something we want to bring to market, potentially with new products within 18 months. What we will offer to a client is financing, potentially leasing. the more traditional leasing side. So on the leasing side, I mean, this platform, is it something really you think we could apply, or is it really meant for the true spirit of subscription?
Yes, so this model can be built out for any number of different business configurations. Basically, that's the idea of building all of this in Excel and linking it to the database on the back end. So in terms of the actual financial projections, absolutely, and I think it's important to compare the different configurations. And on the financing side, Robert, did you want to talk about that at all?
Well, that brings up from a credit scoring perspective. Leasing is a certain business model. Subscription is a certain business model. And we would be, ultimately it comes down to the expectations of how much do you think will be contracted either in the form of leases or subscriptions. But I think the model and the credit scoring would certainly accommodate either approach.
Okay, and about the approaching commercial banking, commercial lenders, what's a usual best practice? Do you think once a package is ready, it's good practice to approach 20 to 30 of them, or actually go for a short list of 5, your top 5?
I think at this stage, the more the better.
Okay.
It does create a burden on the management team to properly accommodate all of the feedback that you'll be getting. But there certainly is strength in numbers, and you'll get a broader base of feedback around which you can make your selection decision.
Okay, thanks.
Yep, and we actually also have some companies that even after going through this process and getting multiple offers, they then come back and they want to model the impact of these offers and what it looks like basically on the bottom line for them to compare. And it can help with negotiation as well. Okay. Any other questions?
If nobody else has anything to ask, a question about the ratio between equity and debt. You mentioned a few times, Robert, about 3 years of balance sheet and so on. And obviously, as a startup, it's not always easy to have all this data because there's not enough history.
Right.
I mean, I personally think that whatever deal we can get, it will be still heavy on equity, and debt will increasingly increase as proportion. But what's based on your experience, a young company with just a year or two of revenue track record, usually what kind of ratio you see between what's expected in equity versus debt?
That's a good question. It's very much dependent upon each company. It depends as well on these factors such as do you anticipate in your business having a very high level of contracted revenues, or are you more subject to marketing and customer acquisition? That's one thing. On the production side, fixed costs or unknown costs. And ultimately, all of that will flow through the credit roadmap and the scoring system to a score. But a component of that will be the debt service coverage ratio. Lenders aren't necessarily focused on the ratio of debt to equity, but they are going to be focused on the revenue and cost certainty, the level of that, and how that translates, how that produces a debt service coverage ratio. So if you have strong contracts on both the revenue and the cost side, and that gives a debt service coverage ratio of, let's say, above 2 times. On the balance sheet side, if that translates into 90% debt and only 10% equity, that's likely going to be fine with the lender because he sees the certainty on the revenues, cost structure is set, and a very strong debt service coverage ratio. So they're not going to be so concerned about a 30 or 40% equity level.
Okay.
Great. Any other questions? And then otherwise, Taraj, did you want to wrap up?
Sure. I mean, if nobody has any more questions, one question that I have, Robert, is around B2C business model where we can gather some historical data on customer acquisition cost. For instance, we can run experiments. We can look at historical data and understand with a certain level of capital or budget for marketing and advertisement through e-commerce platforms, certain level of revenue can be estimated or can be forecasted with some certainty boundary. Would that be something that conventional commercial lenders are comfortable looking at as well?
Yes, really upon the actual business. And another aspect of that is how capital intensive is your fundamental business. If it is a high capital intensity business that is then customer facing, so that you're always dependent upon the customer day in and day out showing up, but you've invested a very high amount of capital, that's probably very difficult for a lender. But if the product and service that you're putting out there is commensurate with the consumer-facing side of it, then perhaps you could get some good financing.
Sure. Thank you for that. No, thanks everyone for your time, and I will share Robert's information, and I think you already have his email. If you have any questions, please feel free to send him, and we're here always to answer any comments, feedbacks, questions you may have for us. I hope you find the session informative. We try to make it very small and friendly. We I think invited about 11 or 12 companies, so it's a fairly good turnout. So I appreciate your time, and stay healthy and safe, and hopefully we talk soon. And thanks everyone for your time.
Thank you all for listening and participating.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Bye-bye.
Thank you.